Ho, 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 we made this.
Hello and welcome to Chucky Vision, the podcast about Chucky, child's play, and everything to do with the killer doll on the We Made This Podcast network. My name is Mark Adams and I am your host, and with me at this time, as always, is my co-host, Dev Elson. Hello, Dev.
Hi-de-ho, everyone. Good to be back.
Hi-de-ho, that's like more Mr. Hanky, although I suppose that's kind of festive.
That's exactly what I was going for.
Yeah, festive Dev. But Dev, today we're talking about the entire series of Chucky, Series 1. Season 1, right, why do Americans call it season? It's a fucking series. Anyway, so yeah, we're doing like a roundup and a chat about the series as a whole. And I wasn't sure this was a good idea because I didn't know whether we'd have much to say. But having made insane amounts of notes, I think we could actually be going on forever.
Yeah, we're going to be talking about... We're not breaking it down like we did last episode with the finale. We're not, breaking down very specific things, but we've got some big topics that I feel like we need to discuss in general for the whole series.
And also, we've been really, really fortunate to have been able to engage with the community on Twitter, which has given us so much inspiration to talk about. We've done polls, we've had chats in private messages, and also back and forth on Twitter itself. And that's been a really, really lovely element of doing this podcast for me, is actually getting to chat to people that are listening in.
Oh, absolutely. And I want to say that right up at the front. This may seem like a co-joint, co-hosts and everything, but really this is Mark's baby.
Oh, don't be ridiculous.
I love talking Chucky, and I love hearing from the fans, but for everyone sending stuff in, Mark has been top of his game, not only liking and retweeting and stuff, but he has been having real full-on conversations with the fans. And, I just want to say in defense for myself, it may seem like I'm not as engaging with that, but Mark sends me everything. I read everything you guys send in. And so, yeah, this is just a big thanks at the start for Mark. And also just a real big thanks because I'm also reading all the love you guys are sending in. And it's really special how much you guys have actually sent in for this episode.
Well, I mean, thank you, but realistically, thanking me for doing something that I'm really enjoying, I don't really need it. But no, thanks, man. And like I say, it has just been lovely. Sometimes when you podcast, you feel like you're shouting down a well. Whereas with this podcast specifically, the amount of response and interaction and chatting we've had, it's been lovely. It really, really has. And that's kind of what we focused this episode on, really, is that we've got so much that people have chatted to us about that I thought it would be a nice idea to, air it.
Absolutely, yeah. And it makes sense because what is this podcast? But it's two people who really like talking about Chucky. And you really get that sense from the fans. All the stuff that we've been getting on DMs or replies and stuff, it always starts with, I have this thing that I really need to talk about. Like, people just get right into it, and it's really engaging.
But once again, very brief chat about the elephant in the room. We shouldn't have been able to watch Chucky, and we shouldn't have been able to do our weekly episodes, and I'm sure people have worked out how we did it. But you can now legally watch Chucky in the UK. It is on Now TV, and like I promised I would, I have been a good boy. I have subscribed to Now TV, and you can get all 8 episodes. And I guess for UK people who haven't accessed it in the way that we did, it is a bingeable show, which wasn't the case when we were watching it first time around. We were watching it weekly, episodically, like our American friends. And first things first, I did have a binge. I thoroughly enjoyed it, and it really works as a binge watch.
Yeah, you were keeping me updated. Did you watch all 8 episodes in one day?
Yep.
How is that as an experience? Just one big story.
I did so much ironing. It was great. My flat was a shit tip. By the end of the 8-hour, 6.5 hour Chucky binge, my flat was immaculate, and I'd had a lovely time watching many, many murders. 21 murders.
So how did it flow then? So you got first-hand experience. How did it flow as one big story?
It felt like it was gripping, but in a different way. The experience of watching it weekly was obviously there was who's going to die this week, what's Chucky going to do, and cliffhangers and pauses that made that part of the experience really special. So it was different, but it was definitely a story in 6.5 hours. It was a massive, massive film, basically, that worked, and I felt that it really held up, and that I could have watched it either way. There's definitely pros and cons of watching things weekly and pros and cons of binge watching. I think the argument that if you only binge stuff, it merges into one and you forget what happened in each episode, I think that's probably true. And could be the case if you did binge watch Chucky. But is that such a bad thing?
Yeah, I mean, there definitely is a benefit to the week-by-week thing, because, like our discussions, we make sure to cover every single thing. But there is something fun about the more spontaneous nature of binging something in one go, because then when you're having those conversations with people, it's like, oh yeah, and this thing happened, and this thing happened. You're just remembering stuff as you go along.
Yeah, and I think it's fun both ways, genuinely is. I loved Daredevil, for example. But I couldn't tell you what happened in each specific episode of Daredevil because I fucking binged that. Like, I just didn't have a life for a couple of days every time a new series of Daredevil dropped. And I did treat it like a 12-hour film. I did. Whereas the experience of watching Chucky in 8 weeks, week by week, part of the fun was the chat. Part of the fun was the speculation. Part of the fun was the anticipation. Whereas it was still a great experience and I loved doing the binge. But I think I am glad that I watched it episodically as well.
Yeah, anticipation is a big part of the Chucky franchise because
True.
Traditionally, you never know when or if we're going to get a sequel.
Yeah, that's always a nice surprise. But we do know we've got Series 2 now.
Oh my god, we do, yeah.
I mean, that's good, right?
Oh yeah, the anticipation there is just having to wait for it.
That's the thing, right, isn't it? I want it now. But we are going to talk about Series 2, Season 2. I'm going to keep calling it Series 2 because I'm fucking British. The anticipation about Series 2. I did it again! Season 2. Fuck. I'm not even going to cut that. The anticipation about Season 2 is a massive thing already. But I don't think we're going to get to see it until probably around the same time, like October next year. 2022.
And yeah, we're going to get into that anticipation later. But if you want to segue now, we made some predictions on anticipation during the series.
We did some polls on Twitter. We did quite a lot of polls because people seem to like them. And we're getting like 20 or 30 votes on each one. And having done polls elsewhere before, 20 or 30 is quite a lot, actually. And so we did some after episode 4 and we did some after episode 8. If we have a look at the episode 4 stuff first. Well, we did 3 separate polls on who was going to survive and who was going to die from each demographic. So we looked at the teenage characters, and we had the same 4 characters for each poll: Jake, Lexi, Junior, or Caroline. And we had 2 separate polls: who was going to survive and who was going to die. And the Chucky Vision listeners said that Jake was going to survive and that Junior was going to die. Well done. They were right.
Well done, guys.
I can't actually remember what I said, but I think I predicted that Jake was going to die because I was in a bit of a fruity mood. But yeah, that one they did very, very well. And, Lexi didn't die, Caroline didn't die, so you could have had the survivors being Lexi or Caroline as well. Whereas the next poll is a little bit more interesting. It was survive or die again with the adult characters. And the characters were Logan, Bree, Michelle, and Detective Evans. And the Chucky Vision listeners predicted that Detective Evans would survive the week before she died on the show.
I remember that. Yeah, that we made that poll. Well, I was going to say premature. We made that poll probably at the perfect time.
Yeah, I think so. And they also predicted that the character that would die would be Michelle. And looking at the characters, Michelle is the only one of the 4 that actually survived.
Yeah, I just want to point out the statistics of the who do you think will survive. Michelle got 0%. Everyone thought that Detective Evans would survive, then Logan would survive, and then Bree would survive.
I think to some extent the Logan thing is because Devon Sawa is quite a big actor and he'd already kind of died as already. I think everyone was like, no, that character will survive because the actor's good. Nah, this is Chucky, man. But yeah, the listeners didn't do so well there. They only had like a 1 in 4 chance of getting the right survivor. But I love the one character that they predicted to die was Michelle, and she didn't.
We should have seen that coming. It was the same as Lexi, wasn't it? It's it's subverting the expectations in the best way.
At this point, though, after episode 4, I don't think Michelle was quite the thunder cunt we knew she was. So maybe that's where that vote came from, and then it was 5, 6, 7 where we really discovered how utterly vile the woman was. And I think that's really sad that the nastier they are, the more likely they are to survive. For fuck's sake.
Is that not Chucky in a nutshell, though?
True. Well, Chucky and Tiffany are the most horrific people in the world. Tiffany, everyone goes, oh, she's cute, she's got the cute boss. No, Tiffany's a massive, savage, brutal bitch. Anyway. So the next survive or die was legacy characters, and the options were Andy, Kyle, Tiffany, or Nika. And by a gigantic majority, everyone thought Tiffany would survive, and she did. And
quote unquote, she did.
Twice, actually. She survived twice, which shouldn't be possible because it's Chucky.
Yeah.
And then the prediction for the character that would die was Andy, who is in a very perilous situation by the end of the series, but he's not dead.
Yeah.
And out of the 4, including Tiffany, they've all had a hard time. But there's only Kyle that kind of sort of maybe could be dead, but we'll cover that later on.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so that one, I was expecting an absolute cull of legacy characters, I'll be honest. And it didn't happen.
Yeah, it's very odd, you know. On one hand, the Chucky series can be incredibly cruel. And on the other hand, you know, not as many deaths as we suspected. We were trying to anticipate the bloodlust.
Yeah.
And you can go a little overboard and try to guess that.
And the final poll that we had after episode 4 was, which legacy character would you like to return? And the options were Tyler, Karen, Jesse and Jade, or Glenn/Glenda. And it wasn't by as much of a majority as some of the others, but it was Glenda and Glenda that everybody seemed to want to come back. And there's so much love out there for this character, despite the fact that Seed of Chucky doesn't have the best reputation. And I think that's fascinating. I think the majority of people that we've engaged with have been LGBTQ. And that's probably where this love for Glenn/Glenda comes from, because they're lovely. I genuinely think they're lovely as a character. And you can say how shit Seed was until the cows come home. I still think that the Glenn/Glenda character is just so nice. And I want to see them back.
And for a TV show as well, which, really allows the exploration of characters. Glenda is the most interesting character to revisit.
I think that it was, for the time, done very sensitively in Seed of Chucky, but I do think it needs, which they did do with the gender fluid comment that went viral on the internet. I think the character deserves a modern take. I really do. So I very much agree with the listeners that Glenn/Glenda. I mean, Glenn was supposed to be the nice one, and Glenda was supposed to be the horrible one, weren't they? When they kind of split the personality at the end.
The overlap is so close of, we want to see what this character could, mechanically in the story, what can they do? Like, to move things along or progress things. But also, as a character, like, what does this mean for this person? That they're two people or one person, and like, what can Don Mancini say about people with this character? And that's so interesting.
And I think there is a huge difference between an explicitly non-binary character and a duality of your personality being put into lots of different dolls, like has happened to Chucky. I think that the difference is something that can be explored and genuinely be very interesting. But one person we didn't put on the poll was Mike Norris, and it is heavily implied, or at least from what I've seen, it's heavily implied that we are going to see Mike Norris come back in season 2. What are your thoughts on that?
I would like to, because out of all the actors, I really do like Chris Sarandon, and a lot of people liked Chris Sarandon. He was like really cool back in the 80s. It wasn't just Child's Play. He was in Fright Night and what's that film? Bordello of Blood. Like, he was in a lot of really good, fun 80s horror movies, and I remember he had a cameo in the 2011 Fright Night.
Okay.
It was a very minor cameo, but like, he was still funny. Like, he still has a charm to him, and I think he would do very well on TV. He would be like Devon Sawa. I think there's a very untapped charisma that would be good on TV.
Yeah, I'd very much like to see Mike Norris, because that is a huge loose end. We don't know how he behaved after the end of Child's Play, really, at all. And we don't know whether or not he was a massive cunt to Andy's mom. I would love to see the drama of Mike Norris, who potentially has thrown Karen under a bus, and Andy kind of interacting 30 years on. That would be some serious drama.
And I'm trying to remember, because I've seen people say that the implication is that Karen and Norris were still together after Child's Play.
Yeah, I think there's kind of almost two schools, isn't there? That they got together and that he threw her under a bus and she ended up in a mental asylum. But he could have been in a mental asylum too. We don't know either of these things.
Yeah, I would say that's interesting to explore. Did he do what he did to, quote unquote, throw her under the bus? Did he do that to protect her? Like, is there duality to that character that he does care for these people? But he did it in the sensible way of trying to bury all this Chucky stuff.
Yeah. But I think looking at this whole poll, I would like to see Tyler, Karen, Jesse and Jade, Glenda, and Mike Norris come back. I absolutely do. But I think drip feeding is probably the way to do it. We had to have Chucky back, obviously. But because we had Chucky, we had to have Tiffany. And I think adding Kyle alongside Andy was really good as well. but I don't think we needed an absolute kind of hemorrhage of legacy characters in season 1. As much as I want to see these characters, I don't want to see them kind of like just dumped. I want some thought being put into it.
Yeah, I definitely get that. Because again, if we're speaking honestly, you know, I really liked seeing everyone again. But, you know, I mean, in terms of minutes, how long was Kyle on screen?
No, exactly.
Not long. So the more people you put in there, the less screen time they all get.
Yeah, and I think it was done with real thought and sensitivity and respect to all these characters and indeed the actors that play them in Series 1 of Chucky. So I have complete faith that the writing team and Don Mancini will make the right decisions when it comes to bringing back these characters. But I want them all, and I want them all now! Do you know what I can't get excited about, Dev? Bloody De Silva. She's almost 100% confirmed for season 2. And out of all the legacy characters, she is legitimately the most meh. I've just meh. I've got nothing else to say. Meh.
I feel like they would have to make her such a different character now, because she was, for the sake of it, kind of just a replacement for Kyle and Child's Play 3.
Meh.
And if anything, she knows how to use guns, but then so do Andy and Kyle now.
Meh. Honestly, mate, meh. There's a reason why she wasn't on the fucking poll. Dull. Meh. Right, I'm moving on. Because meh. So, we did some more polls after episode 8. And the first one was not subtle. Is Kyle dead? And the options were no, yes, and that was her glove, or yes, but that wasn't her glove. And the yeses were 88.5%. So, you know, we all think she survived.
We're all rooting for her.
And it was 50% glove and 58% not your glove. And I think I want it to not be her glove, because it's almost too obvious. And if it isn't her, then it's another character. Is it Glenda? Is it Mike Norris? Is it Jade? Is it Tyler? Probably De Silva, isn't it? But I think, yeah, it does seem like if Andy can survive with a few scratches on his face, that Kyle's too badass. She's too badass. So I think I agree with the listeners on that one.
Yeah. My opinion is, you know, if Don likes putting people through the ringer, but in interesting ways, you know, Kyle can come back, but, you know, she was right next to that bomb. Make her bloody Two-Face. Do you know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
Really put some makeup on her and, you know, have that character deal with that.
And talking about putting characters through the ringer, another one of our polls, again, wasn't particularly subtle. Nika, ... too far. And in complete disagreement to you and I, 85% of the Chucky fans that voted said it was too far. And I did try and engage with some of the people that voted that way to try and explain to me why, because I do feel like you should be used to the way the main characters are absolutely fucked with in this franchise. And one of our regular chatty folk, Lucas, at SunnyWilson18 on Twitter, he just said that it's just really, really hurts to see these characters that you become attached to get such shit treatment. And I think that, in a way, really just kind of highlights how good a writer Don Mancini and his team is. He does get you to invest in these characters, and it fucks you up when he fucks them up. And it's deliberate by Don Mancini. But I can absolutely understand where you're coming from. You know, you don't want to see these characters that you've invested your emotions in get it. I don't know whether horror kind of skews the way you look at things. Would you prefer to see Nika killed over Nika so horribly mutilated? It's an odd one, isn't it? Because a death in a horror franchise is so final, it's almost easier than what happened to Nika.
Yeah, that's definitely an interesting point of killing versus torture and, stuff like that. Don Mancini definitely has a lot to say about that coming up, about what he has planned and what he thinks, about that finale. So, I mean, there's definitely a lot to talk about that. And I think what Lucas said definitely rings true for some of the tweets that I found. So I've found a whole bunch of tweets, and these were pretty much all on the night of the episode coming out. So these were like immediate reactions. And, I will say, these are differing opinions to what we've just said, but we're not putting these out there to make fun of, obviously, but we're not putting these out there to be like, well, your opinion is wrong, our opinion's right, or anything like that,
No, I can absolutely understand where these people are coming from.
Yeah.
And I think empathy is an important thing to highlight. But I wasn't surprised after the initial shock that Don Mancini did this to one of our most favourite characters. And it didn't hurt me in the way that it's clearly upset some other people. And everyone enjoys horror in their own way, I guess.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting point. Yeah, upset is a key word. And I think that's why I want to, that's why I want to, in a positive sense, highlight these tweets. Because, it was a really shocking moment in the Chucky franchise. And if we're going to cover Chucky, then we want to cover the whole community of Chucky and how a lot of people did react to this.
Yeah, I think maybe I'm just... Right, I don't want this to sound patronising, but I wonder whether these are younger people and I'm just a jaded old queen who's watched too much horror. Maybe. I don't know. That's just pure speculation. But maybe not. Or maybe I'm just cold, dead heart. I've been hurt too many times.
Well, before we get into it any further, not all of these tweets are the exact same thought. So some of them, they're all sort of little discussion points. So let's get into it.
Go for
it. I said, let's get into it. Right before I do, I just want to point out, in case this person is listening, but at a Mascomet, I got a lot of these. I follow her, and she does like Chucky art, which is really good. Go check it out. But
I think I've retweeted her if it's the one I'm talking about. She's amazing.
She tweeted a bunch, and then that's what sort of... she tweeted a bunch, and then she like retweeted and like liked a bunch of tweets. So I'm getting this from her like feed. So I will just say, I think a bunch of these people do, online, know each other. So
right.
I'll just point that out. So coming from her, got a bunch of different tweets here. We've got, have Nika split her soul into a doll challenge, which that's an interesting idea, possibly.
Yeah.
I think I said that about maybe that could happen to Kyle.
Yeah.
We've never seen a good person in a doll.
Yeah, and we were tweeted by a chap called Steve from Ontario at Canuck2032, who's basically said something very similar, saying that, a Chucky doll can grow a heart, so can they regrow her some limbs? And that's grim, but it's very Chucky franchise, isn't it?
Yeah, that's very interesting. Another thing, it wasn't a quote, but I did see it somewhere. Someone was saying that if Tiffany is such a fan of Frankenstein and Bride of Frankenstein, that, there's something that could happen. Similar to that, yeah?
Yeah, very true, yeah.
I don't know what Don has got in mind for Nika Season 2, but I feel like there's got to be a way out of that predicament. Like a wild way out of that predicament that doesn't just mean death.
So here's the thing. I think, personally, that she is going to be offered that kind of thing and she's going to refuse it because of the strength of the character of Nika And she will be, this is my body. I don't want to be like Chucky, and I don't want any of your shit. Like, this is my big prediction, actually. I know we're supposed to be doing it at the end. I think she will have an opportunity to be a doll or regrow limbs or something like that, and she'll refuse it. I think that's what he's going to go with on that.
Oh, okay. Right, we've still got a bunch of tweets left. Still from a Mascomat. Finale was really fun overall. Lots of laughs and some messy writing. No stranger to that in the Chuckyverse. I enjoy seeing my little doll go crazy. The Nika scene just really tainted the whole meal is all. Just got to see what becomes of it now, whether it was a dream or not, I guess. Then we got, really hoping that scene was just an incredibly sick way of keeping people talking until season 2 reveals it was a dream.
I don't think it's a dream.
Just remembered that Nika had a nightmare sequence in Cult, so please let this just be one of them. I'm begging.
Good point. She did have a nightmare sequence.
Okay, so yeah, a little credence to that. Okay, maybe.
I think... no, I don't think that's happening.
No, but, they're providing evidence.
Yes, but I don't really think it would be a cop-out, man.
Yeah. A tweet that we agreed with. I'm sorry, but I was not expecting Tiffany to exceed Chucky's level of demented. Like, for real, she topped him on this one. And, we agreed on that one. And then, we're going to get some more similar ones to this, but I'm trying to sleep, but I got so many thoughts like, you can't make me laugh for a whole hour and then do that. That's illegal. And there's quite a few tweets like that is similar to the way she said tainted the whole meal. And that's kind of a general opinion we're going to be seeing of people think this is tonally really out of place.
I don't agree. I think it's deliberate and savage and supposed to fuck with you. I don't think it was a mistake. I don't think Don Mancini's like, oh shit, the fans are right. I shouldn't have completely changed the tone and shocked everyone. That's exactly what he was trying to do. Yeah,
so a couple of these later ones, similar things. At Black Bogmire says, every Chucky thing with Nika in it depresses me so bad. Like, thinking about everything she's gone through makes me angry and upset. I need to get her out of this series. Andy depresses me too, but not nearly as much as I think. I don't know. I need Nika to come out on top somehow. I love her so badly, she doesn't deserve a single thing she's been put through. Maybe. It's kind of why I prefer the older movies over the more recent ones. Aside from nostalgia, it feels depressing.
I think they're right, because it is a more modern take with the savagery on Nika. Whereas they've looked at kind of like lifelong trauma with Andy. It's not been very long for Nika. She's only gone through, really, 3 or 4 years of shite? But holy shit, it's been intense.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, because I'm going to make my point on that. I'll just read this one, which made me laugh. Okay, I think the biggest issue with the scene is it threw off the whole tone. Like, it was so disturbing, and on its own it did a great job. But I don't watch Chucky movies to be disturbed like that. I came here to watch Chucky, not Organ Shit Munchers 45. I think what Don is highlighting is the whole series has had disturbing undertones. Yes. And what he is turning that into overtones. He's making it explicit. Like, we've talked about plenty of times how the gap between Child's Play 1 and 2, Karen was hospitalized,
Oh yeah, there's real darkness.
Her finale, her outcome was horrible, but it wasn't on screen, and Child's Play ends so abruptly that we don't get to absorb that disturbingness like we do now.
That's true. Yeah, that is true. I agree. Yeah, you're right. I don't feel like Karen... Like I said before, I don't feel like Karen's story has been made explicit, whereas Nika's has. And it upset people, and I can see why.
Yeah. Okay, this is an interesting one. At Film Prescott's says, now that it's over, I just want to say, Chucky series Tiffany does not feel like movie Tiffany.
Really?
Now, we had a talk about that in the finale, didn't we? That we felt that this was a natural evolution of her character.
Yeah, almost like she's relapsed.
Yeah, and I think that's something that Series 2 can explore, because we had a lot of these flashbacks in the 80s of young Charles and young Tiffany, but a big period of time that we haven't seen is the gap between Seed of Chucky and Curse of Chucky, and that's sizable. That's like 2005 to like 2017. And in that gap, Seed ends with Tiffany and Glenda, very much against Chucky and away from Chucky. And somewhere in that period of time, they've been, as you said, relapsed. They're on Chucky's side, and Tiffany is almost more evil than Chucky. So it would be interesting to get some explanation of why.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Okay. These are some pretty strong tweets, but I think it's an interesting discussion to make. At 42 Yao says, giving Fiona cool stuff to do ruined not one, but two of the most important characters in your franchise. So you jeopardize the integrity of your characters because you want to give your friend cool stuff to do. Why spend 2 movies developing a strong disabled character that does not let her disability define her, to then shut her up and completely ruin her in one scene? Can't even begin to explain how disappointing Nika's character arc has been, and there's no fixing it now.
That's pretty heavy, and it's going to be something I'm going to struggle to dispute, really, because I'm not disabled. I can't speak on behalf of disabled people. And, I think I saw similar stuff about how it was changing the definition of her disability. And I don't really feel confident to be able to really answer that with other than, yeah, that sucks, actually.
I think, again, it's like the evolution of Tiffany. And maybe that is a criticism of the show, that despite being 8 hours or 6 hours or however long, like, they've had so much more time to explore characters. A lot of that time was spent on the new characters, which was great. But we really need to get quote-unquote answers from some of these other characters. And that is something that, it was cool to see Chucky Nika. Like, that was fun to see. But we haven't really explored since Cult, like, her being a disabled character. Like, that hasn't... Do you know what I mean? Like, Curse and Cult had something to say about being a disabled character and how she is, just as strong as any other final girl. And it's kind of like if Curse of Chucky, I don't know, ended with her getting thrown off the balcony.
Yeah.
And it's like in that film, that isn't seen as a cruel move towards a disabled person because we see her survive and we see her recover. Whereas what we're seeing in this finale is we're ending on her low point and we have to wait for that recovery.
Yeah.
I mean, That's the thing. We're going to have to wait, and then we're going to have to look back at how this story plays out. I think that's how we can connect our opinions and their opinions, is that this is the point we're at. Like, will they come around to this? Will we come around to it? Like it really depends on how these stories pay off in terms of what they're going for.
Yeah, I think you're right. And it is a sensationalist cliffhanger. And is it a cliffhanger, or is this what's permanently happened to the character? I do think there is a little bit of speculation to be had on that. And, it was horrific, and it did shock me, and it takes a lot to shock me these days. But I don't think I was quite as upset as a lot of people.
Yeah, I think those tweets, as strong as they are, they do highlight that, this is, it's a cliffhanger. We're saying that it's an interesting development, but as a cliffhanger, it definitely leaves people on a downer, doesn't it? It's a big downer.
Yeah.
And I think, the show itself ends on that funny kill count with Chucky, but specifically for Nika, it's a very negative ending for now.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, it is a huge, huge discussion, and I actually genuinely think now we've had it, and we've chatted for about a quarter of an hour on it. We could have actually done an episode on this one fucking poll, which is insane.
Yeah, it's very true. There's a lot to say on it. I mean, that is most of the big topics.
Right. Shall we move on? Because I think it is a massive deal, but we've got... we might actually have to split this episode into two.
It could be a long episode. Well, we're only at 42 minutes.
Yeah, we've done about 2 of the 5 things we wanted to do, Dev. Anyway, the next one was a vote on the credits logo. We had to have semis for this because you can only have 4 categories on Twitter. So we had 2 semis of the first 4 episodes and the final 4 episodes of what was the best credits logo. And so the first semi, dolls' heads and syringes and scalpels won equally. So both went through to the final vote. And for the second half of the show, Good Guy Dolls won that. And by a country mile, it was the Good Guy Dolls in episode 8 that won the overall vote. And that was my favourite too.
Yeah, I feel like I made a wrong prediction. I think I said in the finale that wasn't my favourite, and I got just bodied by the response, it seems. Everyone else loved that.
So what was your favourite then?
I voted for the Grave one. I thought the Grave one was just... I don't know, it just felt a little bit crueler. Just to throw all those names at us, and these people are all dead.
I think the poll reflected the 4 strongest ones. Because Graves came second in the semi with that. So Good Guy Dolls, Graves, Syringes, and Dolls' Heads are the stronger of the 8, I think. And for me, it was very, very close, Good Guy Dolls or Gravestones. And the other side of the semis just wasn't as strong. Yeah, I think I agree, but very much honourable mention to Gravestones.
Yeah.
And the final one, which I'm not happy about, was, should we do Chucky shipper fanfiction? And 92.3% of the vote said yes. And I strongly suspect the only person who voted no was me.
Look, people want...
Motherfuckers.
Hey, you are one half of a Chucky podcast. If you want everything Chucky, then we've got to do everything Chucky.
I do not want to do Chucky.
Okay, maybe poor turn of phrase there.
So, okay, we'll do it. I'm not going to promise we'll do it soon. Full confession, we've recorded the episode on the remake already, so that's going up first anyway. But we'll do it. No promise to do it soon, but we will do fucking shipper fan fucking fiction, damn it.
Well, you know what? I mean, I don't know if we are doing it second after the...
No.
No, what I mean is, I don't know exactly when we're doing it, but we are tackling some of the comics. And I've read some of those comics, and, there's a fine line between, it was published, and it was, available to buy, and it had the Chucky TM brand on it, but, what are those but not fanfiction?
But it's not like fucking.
Not all fanfiction is fucking. If you want to get specific, that's like slash fiction.
Yeah, but we explicitly said shipper, not just fan fiction. Shipper fan fiction, which means they want us to read the porn, mate.
Shipping can be platonic, but yeah, I know what people want.
Fuck's sake, I wish I'd not put that up. What did I expect? Right, we're going to move on. We're going to chat about some of the responses we had on Twitter. And I'm going to go through a few of the people that have tweeted us over the last couple of months and just shout them out because it's been nice chatting to them. These aren't people who specifically got in touch for what they wanted us to talk about on this episode, but we've had some really cool conversations. I will have inevitably missed some people out that I've enjoyed interacting with, and I can only apologise in advance. Please don't, shout at me on Twitter if I missed you off. At Illyria Shade 56, ILLYR FIASHADE56. They said that we were 4th in their Spotify Wrapped of the Year. That's fucking amazing.
Oh my god, I saw that. I made a joke. I almost tweeted it. I made a joke to myself when the Wraps were coming out. I was like, wouldn't it be funny if we were on someone's Wrapped? And we were. We beat out Night Vale, which I don't know if it still is, but it was a very famous podcast. And you know, I'm gonna take that little ego boost that we're above that for someone.
I mean, yeah, and it's fascinating that our little podcast that we kind of did almost on a whim because we were both like, Chucky Vision's a funny name, and someone else called us out on Twitter. I can't remember who it was, and I don't think I've made a note. But when they discovered the name of our podcast, they just tweeted us with the Chuckle Brothers with the
I saw that,
gear. And I'm like, yeah, it's a fair cop. The reason for this podcast is Mark liked a pun. For our American friends, look up CHUCKYVISION. It's a kids' show from the 80s and 90s in the UK with 2 comedians called the Chuckle Brothers, who are legitimately brothers. And the show was called CHUCKYVISION. And that's where we got our name, because I'm a massive bellend.
Yeah, other than the title, not much crossover.
Well, I mean, if people want us to, we can have a look at Chucky Vision. Right in the childhood kind of way. Cheap plug, Mark's other podcasts, at RITC Pod on Twitter. But we can have a look at Chuckle Vision if you want us to. It's a fucking deep cut and a tenuous link. But why the fuck not?
Yeah, if you want to hear 45 minutes of us trying so hard to make a connection between that and Chucky.
Dear, we should do it on Right in the Childhood. Anyway, at Frayed Alliance, FRAYED, chap called Vigo, had some really, really nice things to say about our insight into Chucky and Child's Play. And I'm like, I just like sitting and watching it. Thanks, man. You know, it's just like, it's nice to know that people actually value our opinions, though. Even though, really, we're just a couple of fans who sit and chat for an hour, isn't it?
Yeah. I know there's going to be a few other comments like that. And those comments are really special because I just want to say, you know, for the people listening for this one going onwards, you know, in between seasons, I expect a slight dip in listeners because I imagine
a massive dip. We're just doing it for our own indulgence, mate.
But yeah, I imagine a lot of listeners, a lot of casual listeners, are listening for the week to week, you know, Chucky TV show coverage, and I imagine a lot of people, once the finale aired, they're maybe not listening to this one. So a big thanks, a continued thanks to all the people who are still listening and are listening because of us, because that's really nice.
We have got loads of tat to chat about, so stick around if you want to hear us talk shit. We also got tweets from at the Big Nick J and at Raymond of 9, who gave us some insight on how free telly works outside of the UK, with, you know, like no adverts and no sponsorship. And apparently there are some cabled shows that just don't have ads, but quite a lot of them will have, like, the following programme is sponsored by the local garage, which I still think counts as advertising because the BBC doesn't do that. But again, we had some nice chats about that after I got confused about other countries' tellies. And the fact that people actually bothered, that's brilliant. That really is brilliant. So thank you. We also got regular tweets from David Davies from Kid Stuff. He's at HP Comic spelled with a K. And just saying nice things about us, chatting about what we'd said on the show and stuff like that. And like we mentioned before, we are hoping to do a recording at some point with David about one of his... He's going for more topic based on Chucky franchise discussion as the way he's going forward with his post teleseries episodes.
That's a good one, yeah.
Yeah. Whereas we're going for more find another thing that's linked to talk about. So we are going to talk about the remake. We're going to talk about the comics. We're going to look at the Bride of Chucky soundtrack and things like that. And there's still loads and loads of stuff that we can do. And I like the fact that kids stuff is going to take a different tack, but continue like we are.
Yeah, that's really interesting. We should bring our Nika chat over to one of those. That seems like the kind of thing he would cover.
That's true, actually. We also had, because we don't have a Facebook group, and I just don't want more social media. I'm happy on Twitter. Sorry if you're a Facebook or Instagram kind of person. I just don't want to do it, so I'm not going to. But at Film Effects Pod shared our shout out for contributions on Twitter, and they're huge. And Stu Face Down at STOOFACE down. He shared it on a Facebook group, which I wouldn't have done, so that gave us more exposure there. So 2 great people sharing us on Twitter and Facebook, so thank you. Brilliant.
Yeah, those tweets are always nice when it's not even like a reply. It's just someone tweeting like, hey, check out this podcast, it's really good.
Yeah, and stuff like that is brilliant. The more people, particularly if you've got a fuck ton of followers like those 2 have, it's really useful, so thank you.
Yeah, I mean, you can say it like it's free advertising, but I mean,
yeah, that's exactly what it is.
But it's also a big compliment, so we recognise that.
And also at Pombo Paloma Rat, Nico, their name is, and they've just been chatting and saying just the kindest stuff about us on a weekly basis. And thanks, it's really kind. Nico's actually invited us to go on the first non-Portuguese episode of their podcast as well, which we said we were going to do, because I think that's fucking ace. So there's just so many nice people to shout out, and I've probably missed loads, and if I have, sorry. One specific tweet I did get that was in response to our shout out for what you want us to discuss on this was from Mary Poppinit. That's probably not their real name. At ADTSQ83 on Twitter. I love the podcast in season 2. I would love to see the protagonists get in contact with a voodoo practitioner for help. Damballa is not an inherently bad god, so it would be good to see Chucky reckon with using the power for bad. And I think that's a really important thing. We are going to talk about voodoo later on. We've done some Wikipedia research, and we're trying to learn a bit more to try and see what Don Mancini was trying to get at as he kind of like evolves into the voodoo, into the franchise. And I would really like to see some flashbacks with John Bishop, personally, in response to that tweet. I think if we had some flashbacks with John Bishop trying to teach Chucky the good side of voodoo or vodou, and Chucky twisting it for his own evil intentions, I think that would give us a little bit more of a fair depiction of voodoo, because I think it's relatively well known that there were some initial scenes with John Bishop doing healing that were cut from Child's Play. And I think to put those back 32 years later as a flashback, I think that would be an important acknowledgement. And we know Don Mancini goes back to his ideas a lot and a lot and a lot. So yeah, John Bishop in the flashbacks, please.
Yeah, I would love to see that. Even, you can put those flashbacks in. That's a really cool idea. And then like they did with the young flashbacks of Chuck and Tiff, they seemed, I'm going to go into it myself with the Damballa talk, but it seemed like they weren't just 2 people that bumped into each other. They really seemed to know each other. That's a character that has been kind of ignored since the first film. Yeah.
And I think we do need to talk about Damballa, because I speculated that Damballa was a made-up god. They are not. That was my bad. That was ignorance and lack of research. So I can only apologise for that. And this is why we do want to go into talking about voodoo and vodou a little bit later on this episode. Now, we've had quite a lot of private messages as well. And one in particular, someone I chatted to a lot, one of our listeners called Travis, and he's at More Than Mindless, but it's then is THN on Twitter, and he sent us loads of stuff to discuss, which we're really grateful for. First up, he thinks that the black glove is Kyle, and that, like you said before, Dev, that it's because she is disfigured from the explosion.
Mm-hmm.
And he also said that he appreciated Junior saying that Lexi is not like him and Chucky, and the ownership of being a murderer.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, I've seen people still talk about how interesting and good Lexi is as a character, because we said it ourselves, she can be a real bitch, but she's not a murderer.
Yeah, and that's the thing, isn't it? I think in the end, we've got Junior as the most evil of the kids, when he was only medium level evil at the start of the and I think the way the journey of Lexi from going from a bully to someone who understands what she did and has seen what other people are capable of that she isn't. I think that, yeah, the Lexi character and the Junior character are almost underappreciated because Jake was the main character. But the message is right a lot of the time in Chucky. Good people get shit, hence Nika. Bad people don't always get shit. Whereas even someone like Junior, it was almost a very small redemption arc where he acknowledged that he had done wrong, and that that even though Lexi had also done wrong, he owned what he had done by the end of it.
Yeah.
So he also said that he loved all the queer representation. Yep, I think I can agree with that.
Absolutely, yeah.
I find it absolutely fascinating that people were surprised about the amount of queer representation in Chucky. It's written by a gay man. It's always had queer representation. Where's this surprise coming from? It was marketed as having a fucking gay main character, for fuck's sake.
Yeah, I'm not gonna say homophobes. I'm not gonna paint it as so black and white. But I think for a lot of people, when Curse and Cult came out, they saw that as tonally a return to the first couple films rather than the over the top camp of Seed. And I think they kind of bundled in, the whole gayness within camp. Do you know what I mean? Like, They were like, oh, it's more serious, like Child's Play 1, and therefore less gay. And I think, maybe even unconsciously, Don did that. Not that he was trying to, go back at the closet or anything. What I mean is, when he made Curse and Cult, he was trying to go back to keep it simple, just like Child's Play 1. Whereas in Chucky, the TV show, he finally got to, and I've said it myself, he finally got a really interesting balance between the camp of Seed and the tone and stuff. He managed to get the tone, he got the tone right, and then he also, once he got the tone right, then he could really explore the ideas and the story of, queer characters.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I think, again, I've said it before, Seed was better than anyone could have expected for the time, but it still needs a little bit of a sensitive, gentle kind of retconny type modern take as they continue the story, I think.
Basically what I'm saying is camp tone and gay narratives aren't inherently the same thing. Structurally, Seed is kind of a mess, but he was trying, that doesn't mean the what he was getting at in the story was bad.
I think you're right. He also said, after a rewatch with his friend Trevor, who also listens to the podcast, hello Trevor, that he was surprised that there weren't more people outside the theatre after the mayhem. And he's right. I've done my re-binge, my rewatch binge, whatever you want to call it, and I was so into the story that maybe they just didn't have enough extras. If that's the worst you can find, Travis, about the fucking series, then I'll take that. Because it's, I think it's a fair cop, but I don't care.
I think maybe that's why Chucky doesn't typically do big public feats like that.
It was a massive cinema. You know, the run with Jake down the aisle took like 3 or 4 seconds. That's a big aisle. And no, it was a massive cinema and all the people were in the seats. And he is right. Maybe they ran fast.
I think if you look at those scenes, it was, like the police weren't there to like keep everyone together. So I think in the time that like the 5 minutes or so where Jake was fighting Chucky, I think everyone just fucking legged it like down the street as far as they could go. So that's why it was pretty quiet when they left.
Yeah, I think that's the way you can justify it. And he also said that, similarly to me, that the rewatch was very high. He's done a binge. And that it's just as much fun rewatching it, knowing how it plays out. And he then said that he's going to binge the series after he gets the Blu-ray, and he's binged the movies again. And I think that is something I want to look at, is I do want to buy the Blu-ray and look at the extras as an episode of this.
Yeah.
So I think we'll be doing that. One thing I'm a little bit concerned about is whether or not it will be another fucking issue of the Americans get a Blu-ray 6 months before we do.
I think these days, I don't know if it needs to be like the actual physical Blu-ray. Like if you buy the digital version, then that might come with the special features as well.
Yeah, but again, it's whether or not we can access it through British Amazon or British Now TV or British whatever the fuck. But I would like to take a look at the Blu-ray properly. But, we need the PAL version because gone are the days of having multi-region DVD players because literally everyone plays DVDs on their PlayStation. Or is that an unfair assessment of modern life? Have you got a DVD player?
No, I have a PlayStation. Yeah, my PS4 is my Blu-ray player.
Yep, mine too. But that's a prediction, Moan, so I should probably shut up. And his hopes for season 2 is that he would like some more queer characters. I mean, I think we've got enough, but yeah, more is always good.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many different stories you can tell, so maybe someone who is, I don't know, for example, someone closer to you, Mark. Someone who's been out for a long time. Someone who
true.
Can, someone, because, we've seen Jake come out, but maybe someone who's already out and has a bit more experience. Similar to, what's his name from Bride of Chucky? Oh,
the gay best friend.
The friend, yeah.
Yeah, shit. We've forgotten his name.
Oh, yeah. He was a good character, but he had more life experience. So someone like that. Oh, I guess I said someone closer to you, but closer to Mancini as he is now.
That would be brilliant. Like, I mean, I was slightly grotty about the fact that I got called an elder gay recently. I'm 43, getting sick. Whereas I don't think it would be too mean to call knocking 60 Don Mancini an elder gay. And I think you're right. An elder gay character would be great. I hadn't even thought about that. And apparently I'm an elder gay.
Elder gay makes me think of like Luke Skywalker in the new Star Wars films.
Gay people aren't Jedis.
I know, but elder gay, it sounds like some hermit that lives out on an island and gives advice.
I wish gayness would like give you superpowers. Right, okay, maybe I am an elder gay. If it's living on an island and giving out advice to young gay people, I do that. So maybe I am an elder gay. Fucking gay Jedi. Fuck my life. Fuck this. Podcast's over. What else did he say? He wants more great one-liners from Chucky. I think that's a given. And he wants the relationship of Jake and Lexi explored because he feels like it was rushed how they quickly went from loathing each other to trusting each other to being chosen family. And I think there is some real merit in that argument. If you are going to be critical about this, then maybe that was a little bit rushed.
I made that prediction myself when it was like episode 4 or something, when she called him out for wanting to be a murderer and stuff. And I thought, oh, this is really going to lead into some meaty discussions. But then, kind of pacing-wise, from there on, it was like, oh, we need to team together to defeat Chucky. And it never really gave him the moment to... it never really gave him the time to unpack what he had been doing with Chucky.
Yeah, I think that's true. And I think some further explanation would be good. Yeah. He also wants Karen and Glenn/Glenda back, don't we all? And this one I love. He wants a Christmas holiday special with Chucky, because he loved Hello Kitty, Chucky, and that murderous elf is his suggestion. And I'm down with the Christmas special.
You know what we need? Since Chucky has been doing so well dealing with legacy and the past and the future, we need a Chucky Christmas Carol.
Oh, fuck.
Chucky and the ghosts of Christmas past, present, and future.
No. Oh, dear. He's also said that he wants the colourful logo on a t-shirt. And I'm all about Chucky merch. Get me some Chucky merch, so I agree with this. I mean, I think I mentioned it before. Tesco had a fucking Chucky t-shirt that I bought. So more Chucky merch.
That's some easy merch if you're going to have a different titles sequence every episode. That's eight shirts there already.
That's true. That is true. Chucky merch. And he's also said that he wants to see Kristen De Silva back, or Tyler. And I can't remember who it was. I think it was Kids Stuff. It was definitely one of the other Chucky podcasts. Pointed out that they found out that Jeremy Silvers, who plays Tyler, is actually in the nick.
That's going to be difficult.
I hope he hasn't done something completely unforgivable. I couldn't actually find out where they got that information from. But the actor hasn't acted in forever. And yeah, a lot of Americans are in the nick, aren't they? Doesn't America have the greatest number of criminals in the percentage-wise in the world or something like that?
Yeah. Not to make this a discussion point, but I think that's more because of the whole prison system, and
oh fuck yeah!
Rather than America being full of bad uns, I think it's more
absolutely. If I implied anything other than,
I don't think you were. No.
No, good. American prison system's just America's crazy, but American people are lovely. Yeah.
It's just that the system is very eager to put people through prison.
America is crazy. I mean, it's made some incredible popular culture that I will always love. But just everything from gun laws to prison system to not having a healthcare system. America's fucking crazy.
There's probably something to be said.
Oh, and delivering packages without brown paper vacuum. Fucking America, man.
Yeah, you should go to prison for that.
Probably do. Oh, dear. But yeah, I love that. Travis sent us loads of stuff to talk about. He also sent me lots of articles that I haven't read, but I know you have, so that's good.
I'm glad we leave some of those random tangents in, because I didn't think people would ever really reply to those, but it's nice that they are.
I agree. We also had a message from a regular listener, Waji, and that's at WAJEEHO94 on Twitter. And he said, I'm just going to read it out because it's a really interesting discussion point. Something's bugging me, and that is the entire story and motive for the whole TV show. I don't get why the ritual needed to happen in the first place. For an innocent kid to kill someone. We already saw 3 Chucky dolls at the same time moving together in cults. So it doesn't make any sense that he needs a kid to kill someone in order to have the army of dolls, while he can already do that. The whole idea of the movie cult was that Chucky is able to split his soul and make other dolls move around while all still being him. So why bother with all that effort he went through? Why couldn't he just do the same voodoo spell he used in cults to pass his soul into the short-haired Chucky, the one Andy brought into the hospital?
That, I think, I don't know if he got it from that or he took it as that when he saw the show, but when I was looking for stuff on Damballa, I was on the Chucky fan wiki, and that wiki described the exact same thing, that corrupting a child was a ritual for the army. Now, when I saw the show myself, I never put that together as that's what happened.
Well, yeah, that was a big reveal, that the reason why he'd tried one by one with all the different young people to try and get them to kill was to give him the power for the ritual. And I think for me, it's implied, it's that because it's a bigger ritual, but it isn't made explicit in the show.
Yeah, because the dialogue we get is Kyle basically saying something to that effect, but that's the point, something to that effect. Did I just miss an explicit line of dialogue that said that was the ritual? Because I took it as more, I don't know, metaphorical, allegorical, that he was corrupting a child. I didn't think he was actually doing that for a ritual. I thought he just made all those Chucky dolls in his own time. Like, that he could already do that.
No, it was made... The Kyle exposition chat definitely suggested that was why he was doing what he'd been doing. But again, a conversation with Wadji said that the old spell is... It would have been okay with him if it had been explicitly established that the old spell didn't work anymore and that they needed to do something bigger for a bigger number of dolls, but that wasn't made explicit. And like you said, it was just that very brief Kyle exposition monologue that gave us the motivation for the whole show. And it didn't affect my enjoyment, but I didn't really think about it quite as much as clearly Wadji did. And now he's pointed it out. I'm like, oh.
Well, I'm glad he did, because I didn't think about it at all. I didn't think that was the plot development. So, I mean, yeah, maybe make it a bit more explicit, because, yeah, I didn't pick up on that.
I think to some extent, obviously, you've now got Tiffany has split her soul at least once, because she's in Jennifer Tilly and she's in a new bride doll. But that's only two. I think that it was implied, but probably needed to be made explicit, that for the sheer scale of 72 dolls, they needed a sacrifice.
Yeah, maybe that's something especially having this conversation now, maybe that's something I will, on a rewatch, be like, oh yeah, duh.
Yeah, he also said, how did Kyle know? Good point. Is Kyle an expert in voodoo now?
Well, we'll get to that in the Damballa talk, but I think I mentioned it on one of the movie talks. Like, it's just in a book, these rituals. Anyone can do it. Why is Chucky the only one doing this?
Yeah, and my reply to Wadji was, maybe she read Voodoo for Dummies. and his reply was the crying face, so I didn't upset him. Not, the happy crying face, the lol face. Yeah, and I think it's something, again, we've said that really, really needs to be looked at in season 2. It's part of the reason why I'm so glad that they have a season 2, because the voodoo stuff needs to be looked at. The voodoo stuff needs to be clarified, and just John Bishop. Give me some John Bishop. Good time.
It's definitely an interesting way. That comes into the job of a writer, how to get that in naturally. Because it's like, this sounds like a negative thing, but I really liked how they did it in the TV show Legion, that Marvel one.
Yes, which I hated.
Well, that show swung for the fences in terms of like presentation and stuff. But yeah, there were like entire scenes in that where John Hamm was the narrator and he would just explain a psychological experiment for like 5 minutes and then be like, yeah, so this is how it works. And then that's what I'm thinking with Chucky. It's like, does Don really want to waste 5 minutes just sitting down and explaining this to everyone?
Yeah, it might be useful because it is getting into slightly yucky territory, I think.
I think it's similar to the Nika story. It's just where we're at now. It's yucky right now. Will it be yucky in retrospect?
Good point, well made. Fully agree. The other stuff that YG said to us was, what's your favourite episode? Mine is episode 6. So I think mine was, I mean, obviously all 8 episodes were best episode ever, but I think it was 7. I've always liked in films and in teleseries the kind of build up to the finale, potentially more than the finale. So I think I was always probably likely to, as long as it was a good build up, I was always going to like episode 6 or episode 7. And yeah, I think episode 7 was my favourite. What about you?
Yeah, it's interesting because I asked you what it felt like watching the whole thing in one go, but I think that's kind of how I think of the show. I mean, we were pretty positive on the entire show, episode by episode. So I think that's kind of how I see it, as just, like, I love the whole thing. Did a particular episode stand out? As you can tell, I have a kind of foggy memory. Not a
No
great memory.
cop-outs. It's okay to not have a favourite episode there, but it is a cop-out.
Oh, it's a cop-out, I guess. I mean, I don't know. I kind of like some of the early episodes. I think, episode 1 is I think we said episode 1 was a really good jumping off point for, like, all the new characters and stuff.
I think it's perfectly valid to say that episode 1 is probably the most important one, because if it had been CAC, people wouldn't have tuned in for the rest of the series. So, yeah, there's some real validity in that, absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty good. I mean, you get with the first episode, you get kind of like a mini story, with Jake's dad and him dealing with that, and then that death at the end with Chucky. It does a very good job at setting stuff up.
And Raymond of 9 at Raymond of 9 also messaged us. I'm just going to read out what they said again. Great podcast, what fun. Feel free to keep the deep dive into the Glenn Glenda issue. So it's another chat about Glenn Glenda growing up. I have no problem with this. Was the science teacher Glenda? Very odd that we saw her at the end looking at the teenagers. Also, I was thinking that since all of the parents are basically dead, maybe next season it will be a travel murder series. Sort of like Ash versus the Evil Dead, where the kids have all the addresses of each Chucky doll. Looking forward to whatever you do. And that's Raymond from New Jersey, who apparently his grandparents are from Glasgow, so he's kind of Scottish, but mostly American. So maybe he understands some of how America's crazy as well.
Well, New Jersey, that's where the TV show is set.
Oh shit, yeah, of course. Brilliant. And I think there's been huge amounts of speculation about whether Miss Fairchild is Glenn and or Glenda, because we don't know really what happened to the two aspects. I think it's more likely to be Glenn than Glenda, though, because Glenda was the horrible one who made a bomb, actually. Glenda made a bomb.
Yeah.
But she was, at the end of Seed, Glenn was the lovely little boy, and Glenda was the horrible, murderous little girl, wasn't it?
Well, one thing that's never been cleared up is that movie ended with Glenn being strangled by Chucky. Like,
oh, there is that.
What's the resolution to that?
Good point. But yeah, I think there's been a lot of speculation about it. And I think it's a red herring. I have from the very beginning. I don't think that Miss Fairchild is Glenn or Glenda. I don't.
If you look at her involvement in the show, if she knew what was happening, if she was, quote-unquote, a good character, like the good Glenda, then she didn't really do much to prevent stuff. I mean, she had Chucky in, episode 2. She had Chucky in her science room. She could have destroyed it there and then.
And she would have obviously known that Chucky could potentially be in a good guy doll. And I think she's just a nice lady who cared about her students. And I don't think that there's a link there. I think she's just a interesting support character. She could end up being kind of like the guardian of the orphans in season 2. I think that's a likely thing that, Jake and Devon are both orphans and they're both minors. So she could end up being their guardian. I could definitely see that being a thing.
Yeah, and I guess that ties into the second point of Raymond's question was, comparing it to Ash vs. Evil Dead. Now, I think I made a point in one of the later episodes that is something that this TV show could have been from the start if someone else had pitched it.
Yes, you did. Damn, yes, you did.
Yeah, Andy and Kyle on the road, basically like Supernatural, except every monster is Chucky. But that is something, I don't want to say more generic, but that is something that someone else would have pitched, I imagine.
I'd watch that.
I mean, I would, but, obviously Don himself wanted to do something a bit more personal and wanted to do, something a bit more drama than a straight Ash vs. Evil Dead fantasy. Because I think that's the thing. Evil Dead and Chucky are not the same kind of story.
No.
Like, Evil Dead is very much geared towards the violence and mayhem and constant roller coaster. Whereas even the Chucky films, there's always story there that, there's always character story there and people undergoing story. You know what I mean?
There are comparisons, though. Child's Play 2, he has knife hand, which is very similar to chainsaw hand.
In that comparison, I do want to point out that I really like the Ash vs. Evil Dead show, and I think that show does slow down at times to explore its characters in interesting ways, but I mean that the pacing of that show is way faster than Chucky was.
Yeah, I think so.
And I think, I don't know, if you put it on the road, it would feel very different to season 1, which could be a good thing, but then depends on where they're going, really.
Yeah, well, and I think speculation about what season 2 is going to be. And in my notes for that was, I think it's going to be road trip style. And so, yeah. How many episodes do you think there's going to be?
I imagine, and I'm trying to remember other shows. I've watched other shows that have started with like 6 or 7 episodes. And because of the success, and when they go into season 2 has been a few episodes longer. So like 9 or 10 episodes. But I can't imagine the Chucky show going further than that. I imagine it might just be like maybe 10 episodes.
Yeah, and well, there was the huge controversy of Internet Movie Database getting it wrong, wasn't there? And us being corrected. Oh, it was by YG who actually we talked before. But yeah, I would like maybe 12 or 13. I don't think it needs to go crazy American 22 episodes in a season.
No, well, I doubt that will happen because that's more of like a syndication thing.
Exactly.
I think if they wanted to go syndicated, they would have done that from the start. I can't imagine. I don't think there's ever been a show that's gone from short to long form like that. But even then, 13 episodes, a comparison to a show you mentioned earlier, Daredevil. Those Netflix Marvel shows, like season 1 of Daredevil and season 1 of Jessica Jones, and even season 1 of Luke Cage, to a degree, those are really good self-contained stories. But even then, I'm less inclined to binge those shows again, because it really reminds me, I'm going from comparison to comparison, but it reminds me of Dexter. Dexter, those seasons are only like 12 episodes each, but Dexter feels so much longer because whenever Dexter isn't on screen, that show really slogs. And I would wonder if Chucky added like 5 more episodes, like, are they going to fill that with less interesting stuff?
Yeah, I think you're right. There needs to be more about, this is the story we want to tell. This is how long we think it's going to be. This is how many episodes we need. Rather than, we're successful, let's have lots and lots of episodes and put in some filler shite. I mean, I'm a massive fan of Buffy, ignoring the fact that we don't really talk about Joss Whedon and his country anymore.
Oh, yeah.
But there are a lot of filler episodes in Buffy. Like, really kind of dull Monster of the Week stuff. Where Buffy's at its strongest is where it has a Monster of the Week, but also continues the ongoing storyline. And I think they're 22 episode seasons. Most of them could have been knocked down to 14 or 18, I think.
Yeah, it's the same for a lot of shows. I mean, I love the X-Files, and so does everyone, but... I mean, if you're doing a binge of the X-Files, are you really watching every single episode?
So,
No one does that. No one does that.
well, someone does.
I mean, with the X-Files, ironically, most people skip the story episodes, because the main story of X-Files does not matter. It's all about the Monster of the Week stuff with that.
So I have watched the X-Files from start to finish, every episode once. There are a lot of shows that I've done that with.
I've done that, yeah.
But no, have you got any more theories for season 2? Because I'm not really into that. I just want more. Give me more. Want more. And there's things I want, but I haven't really made any predictions.
I imagine it, and I'm making so many comparisons, but I imagine it would be like the Preacher TV show. How the Preacher comic was very much on the road, and like it was always moving somewhere, and they were always getting up to different adventures. But in the TV show, it was very much like each season was set in one location. So it would start, like season 2 would start with them on the road going somewhere, but then they would stop in a town, and then they like the characters weren't intending to stay. They were going to keep moving, but then something happens, and then they end up there like the entire season.
Yeah.
That's how I kind of predict Chucky would go. Like they're on the road, but then they're going to stop somewhere.
Okay.
But again, where they would stop, who knows?
And my issue with that is it's all a little bit Harry Potter, quitting school to go and kill the bad guy, and his soul that's been split into many, many different things. It's a bit Harry Potter in it.
Yeah, that's what. It's once you've established a format. I don't know if we have established a format with Chucky yet.
No.
Because that's one of the benefits, I guess, of it, is that it always keeps evolving.
And I hope it isn't as simple as a road trip going and killing various Chucky dolls. I do hope it's not as simple as that. I want Chucky to carry on being as sophisticated as it has been.
I mean, they could always go back to Chicago. Chicago was kind of a big deal in the first film, and they could revisit it.
Yeah, that would be cool. But we don't know where all these Chucky dolls are going. We just know they're going around the country to disadvantaged kids.
Yeah, that'll be that's a prediction thing. I can't imagine Andy just, like, even at gunpoint, just doing that.
Yeah, I don't think they're going to actually get distributed. Something's going to happen because Andy's driving the van.
Yeah, I can imagine episode 1 of season 2, like, involving him, like, I don't know, driving into a river or something to destroy it, yeah.
I think the first episode of season 2 will be an immediate continuation. There won't be a time stop. There can't be a time stop. Everything is happening now.
Well, I mean, TV shows tend to do that. It'll probably piss people off, but I can imagine the first episode, like the first 15 minutes being with, like, De Silva. Like, what has De Silva been up to these last few years?
Oh, fuck. All the characters to bring back.
That happens on a lot of TV shows, especially the longer ones, where it's like, you get that penultimate episode. Or not the penultimate episode, but it feels like the penultimate episode where all the plot lines are coming together. And then the next episode would be like, well, here's some other plot lines we didn't tie up yet. And then
you mean the Walking Dead thing?
Yeah, that happens a lot, yeah, on that show, yeah.
Fuck The Walking Dead.
Everyone watching is just like, get on with it. Like, get to the end.
Fucking Walking Dead. Fuck.
I think that's something that they did very well, again, with the amount of episodes in Chucky, is that it never really felt like, get on with it.
No, I agree. So we're going to move on and have our planned little chat about voodoo, vodou, Damballa, and other stuff regarding the kind of voodoo lore within the Chucky series. And I just want to highlight the fact that we are not academics. We are not capable of anything other than essentially a Google research, which isn't proper research. We don't have access to journals. We don't have access to
theoretical books on faith and religion and that sort of thing. We aren't academics in any way, and therefore our opinion is essentially a layman who's got Google. It is not anything resembling a academic level, scientific level, theoretical level research. To say, I did my research, well, that could be a whole other argument about other idiocy that we're not getting into. But what we're getting at is that we are just two fellas who have decided we want to learn a little bit more about the background in the best way we can, but it is nothing resembling anything like expert knowledge. We've put in a few hours. We've not put in a lot of time. Would you say that's a fair way of kind of caveating everything we're about to say? I'm not sure caveating is a word.
Oh, I definitely. Especially since however much research we put into this, this is very much curiosity on our end, because even from a cursory glance at Wikipedia, actual voodoo does not resemble the voodoo in this show at all, especially
or
Damballa.
Indeed any popular culture shit. Voodoo is grossly misrepresented. And I've been to New Orleans, and fuck me, is it commercialized in New Orleans. Yeah, they perpetuate the stereotype to make money in New Orleans.
Yeah, and I remember the Preacher Show does that as well. That really delves into the voodoo side. And I guess there's an aspect of that maybe in real life, to the same sense that people think, people pray to God for selfish reasons. There is an element to that, in that these characters in fiction are abusing the quote-unquote magic that exists. But yeah, very rarely in fiction do they really explore the actual side of them. I mean, you get that in like Supernatural, they explore, Judeo-Christian religion, and that gets explored most often in like supernatural fiction. But like what the research that we're going to be talking about, even bare bones 101 voodoo, that it rarely gets actually any name drops in fiction. It's always just what can we do practically with voodoo.
Yeah, and I think if you're looking at something like voodoo, so let's say Louisiana voodoo and Haitian voodoo, which seem to be the two things that have influenced Don Mancini here, these are still active religions that you need to have some sensitivity around, because this is people's real life faith. Whereas if you look at something like the Norse gods or the Greek gods, so let's say Thor and Odin, or Poseidon and Gilgamesh, whatever, these are all now legendary characters, legendary things that no one actually follows as a faith. Whereas something like Haitian voodoo and Louisiana voodoo are very much still people's belief systems. And so there's a different level of sensitivity required on these kind of things. It's okay to make Thor a woman in the Marvel comics. In fact, it's cool. But if you were to, for example, make Baron Samedi a woman, would that be inappropriate?
I think, to make it clear, it always seems like in Chucky and Baron Samedi was someone I was going to mention. It's like, I think a lot of people recognize the name Baron Samedi from the Bond films,
which is hardly a pleasant depiction of voodoo there either.
No, but they're not intending to actually try and depict voodoo religion in there, are they? That is a character who is taking the name Baron Samedi, and that's maybe what is happening in the Chucky world as well. It's, do we know for certain that this is Damballa doing this, and is it inherently the same voodoo religion that we are talking about?
No, I don't think it is. I think it's a fictional voodoo in a fictional universe. And everyone does that. There's Brother Voodoo, going back to the Marvel thing I was briefly touched on. Brother Voodoo is a Marvel character in the comic books that not only is he a practitioner of voodoo, he's actually one of their heroes, and he uses his voodoo for good. So, again, voodoo has more actual reality, and he is a superhero who uses magic via voodoo, and there isn't anyone who does that. That's not a thing that voodoo practitioners have in the real world. They don't have the power to use magic because magic isn't a thing in our world,
Yeah, and that's something I definitely noticed in like the research and stuff, that possession is. It seems very much like not even a cursory glance because they didn't have Wikipedia back then, but like just from what they knew, they were like, "Oh yeah, voodoo, Damballa, possession. I'll just use those words to build this plot because there is a large aspect of possession in voodoo and Haitian voodoo, but it's not the possession we're familiar with in the Chucky world."
No, I think if we have a brief kind of synopsis of what we've discovered about Haitian voodoo and Louisian voodoo, because we literally came into it with nothing but a stereotypical, sensationalized, we've watched Bond, etc. kind of popular culture equivalent of what it really is. So Haitian voodoo, it's basically a syncretism of lots of traditional West and Central African faiths. It kind of amalgamated a number of different tribal beliefs into one overarching thing. And one of the biggest elements of it that I had no idea about was that they do actually believe in one God. And things like Damballa are actually Iwa spirits. I don't know if I pronounced that right, but IWA.
Yeah, I think for a lot, I just want to say, for a lot of these terms and names and stuff, I think there are multiple pronunciations because there's definitely multiple spellings.
Yeah.
And I think that comes from the different tribes.
Again, I don't speak any African languages whatsoever, so I'm coming from a ignorant white British. It's IWA, so I'm going with Iowa, but it could be any pronunciation really. And Damballa isn't a god; he's an Iowa, which, if you remember in the last episode, I was referring to him as a god because I didn't know any better, and so I've learned. And Haitian voodoo has quite a lot of respect in the spirit of the dead. It has offerings to the dead and to their Iowa and God, divinations and herbal remedies. But what I didn't know at all is that there's actually quite a lot of Catholicism in Haiti as well. And that does influence Haitian voodoo. Voodoo has no leader, orthodoxy, or exclusivity. You can be a Christian and practice Haitian voodoo. Again, I didn't know that. There's no real code of ethics like a more Abrahamic religion might have, in as much as morality is more to be true to yourself rather than a list of things that you need to do to be moral, which I thought was fascinating because that resonates really well with me as a humanist, because I am an atheist, I am a humanist, and I have come up with my own moral code and my own sense of morality as I've got older and wiser and learnt about the world and decided what's important to me. And so I think maybe I've got more in common with Haitian voodoo folk than I initially thought. But what we can't ignore that there is an element of animal sacrifice. That is acknowledged and is a thing that voodoo does encourage when you're presenting offerings to the spirits of the dead or your Iwas or God. But so for me, I don't see much difference between, again, this is coming from as a vegetarian, I don't see much difference between offering cooked meat to a god or a spirit and then burying it. I don't see much difference to that than doing it live. You know what I mean? You cut the throat of a cow and then you present it to your god. That's no different really to presenting a stew made from a cow, in my opinion. So I don't really know how I feel about animal sacrifice. I don't think it's quite as shocking as I initially thought.
Yeah, I can't really say I'm either side of it, but as a meat eater, I have to ask who has more respect for these animals, me or them, because, I'm not killing animals myself, but they're not doing it for no reason. They're doing it in utmost reverence. So
Yeah.
they really believe it is for a divine purpose. So, I think they do believe these animals are very significant in life and in death.
Yeah, and I mean, I've made it explicit that I have no faith in any god or gods. And in fact, my job is based in non-religion. So I come at this very much from a respect other people's beliefs kind of attitude. I do feel like I can question them, but I want to do that with respect and kindness and empathy. Where are you coming from on this, Dev?
Yeah, pretty similar approach. I guess I'd say I'm largely atheist. I don't know if I reject any belief, because I think they are interesting. I definitely find cultural aspects, such as voodoo, interesting, because I'm of the belief that, like, unless you let religion dictate your life, like how Christianity in America, the bond there. But I think, if you read a book and it tells you to be good and be good to other people, then I don't think that's an inherently bad thing if you keep it simple like that.
Absolutely, and I think humanists are misrepresented as anti-religious. That's just simply not true. I am humanist. I know better than people who seem to think they know my belief system. And the reality is, if you're a humanist, you will actively campaign against religious privilege. But that's because it's a privilege, it's an inequality. It's nothing to do with any disrespect or anti-religion. And I have the utmost respect for anything that anyone believes. And I think that everyone should have freedom of religion. And yeah, I also find other people's faiths fascinating. I'll never believe it, but I do find faiths fascinating. And I do also want to say that it really is as simple as there is no bad religion. There's just bad people who use religion.
Yeah. And similar to that, you get elements like this. I'm not blaming Chucky, but, just pop culture as a whole can misrepresent certain religions as more negative than they are.
Yeah, and I think that Chucky has gently misrepresented voodoo and vodou, but not in a deliberately antagonistic or pernicious way. I think particularly, you've got to remember it's 30 years old. And like you said, it was harder to do even the basic level of research that you and I have done on this sort of thing. So the initial writing was inevitably influenced by popular culture and stereotyping.
I just want to note as well, because we haven't really said it, but I think we think Don Mancini as the creator of everything. But there was a lot of rewriting on the first Child's Play, so I do believe a lot of the voodoo stuff came from Tom Holland, the director.
Right.
So that is why Mancini has never really lent into it.
Yeah. So let's have a quick look at Louisiana voodoo. And it was never illegal, but it was restricted by laws of black people gathering in the 18th and 19th century, and did decline until the tourist trade that I did briefly talk about before. And so it has increased in popularity as it's become more publicly touristy, I suppose. And it's an adapted faith from not just Haitian Vodou, but other influences. And it's a mainly oral tradition, which again goes back to what we were saying about not really being able to research these things. I sincerely doubt that anyone from the Child's Play team went, I'm going to pop down to New Orleans and I'm going to have a chat with some voodoo practitioners. I don't think they had the budget to do that. And whereas Haitian Vodou is sometimes regarded as problematic because of the misogyny, that isn't the case with Louisiana voodoo, because there's more focus on the priestesses and feminism within voodoo. And like I say, I've been to New Orleans and it's everywhere. It's absolutely everywhere. And it did feel a lot more like if you'd gone to Greece and they'd had, a Hercules statue. And it goes as far as, all kinds of merchandise, up to and including fridge magnets. So there is an element of sensationalism, maybe, but definitely making money from voodoo. But what religion doesn't make money through that sort of thing?
Yeah, I was going to say, yeah, you can, all the different, Christianity and stuff, like St. Peter, like all the saints and stuff have like their own little imagery and iconography. And you can get that on, lots of people do get that on like bumper stickers and stuff like that.
Exactly right. The fish symbol, and
Yeah.
every cross on a religious lady's wall is money for the church, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, if you want to talk about misrepresentation, the upside down cross is not a sign of the devil.
No, that's not true.
But pop culture takes an image that they think is, oh, it's the cross but upside down, therefore it's evil.
Yeah. And so briefly, we'll have a chat about Damballa. He is, as we've discussed before, he's an Iowa, not a god, and he is present in both the Haitian and Louisiana traditions. So this is the reason why we've looked at Haitian voodoo and Louisiana voodoo, because I don't feel like it's clear ever within the Chucky franchise which form of voodoo it is. And that could be because it's deliberately vague, or it could be because it was just, it wasn't differentiated at the time it was written,
Well, one of the funny things now doing research is immediately, if you just look up Damballa, it says out of the 1,000 or so Iowa, he is generally the most benevolent. So,
yeah.
Not really accurate to what Chucky is presenting.
Which is really weird. I speculated that it was a random creation by Don Mancini, that this Damballa was an evil god that was a soft reboot. It's not. Damballa is one of the most famous and revered voodoo and vodou Iowas, and is seen in some traditions as a primordial creator. That's pretty fucking big. And is always represented as a great white serpent. And if we're going to crudely compare it to something we might all understand, he's kind of about the level of Moses within the tradition. So think about how well-known Moses is within Christianity. That's kind of like the level we're looking at here with Damballa. So he's hardly an obscure god like I suggested. And you said he was always portrayed as benevolent. You're right. Patient, kind, wise, and peaceful, but a little bit detached. None of those things seem to apply to the Damballa that is referenced in the Chucky teleseries.
That's what I mean by them just grabbing a few recognizable names. If they had just heard someone talking about voodoo, they may well have mentioned Damballa. And so they just took that name out of a hat of all the names they could have chosen. They just picked Damballa.
Yeah, it does feel like that.
It's kind of like if they had done it with Christianity and then they had been like, yeah, Chucky, he worships Moses, the evil god. I think most people, in America and England and stuff would be like, that doesn't make sense.
No, it doesn't. I can't speak for people that follow Vodou or Voodoo, but it doesn't feel like there was ever any malice in the depiction in the Child's Play franchise. I think it was a plot device that had to be expanded as the whole story expanded and became more complicated and complex and deep. I do think that it needs a good rethinking. I think that they need to do something about it because it doesn't feel like it's as sensitively treated as perhaps it could be in a modern world.
I wonder if at this point they could, because we discussed whether or not Damballa was good, and obviously Damballa is good, so there's that disconnect. I wonder if at this point they can have like a quote-unquote reveal that it's someone else or something else pretending to be Damballa.
Yeah, I think that would be a nice way of dealing with it, yes.
Because in my research, I had a look at the Iowa and I wanted to see, are there any quote unquote evil Iowa? Sort of like how there are angels and devils in Christianity. I wanted to see if there's any darker sides. And there are many nations and families within the Iowa, and the Gede family, which focuses on death and fertility. But like the tarot cards, death is not bad. It's just renewal and continuation. And so we got Baron Samedi. He's kind of the big one. He deals with resurrection, and that's kind of close. But then like the people who work with Samedi, they deal with different kinds of resurrection and different kinds of death. And the closest I could find was Baron Criminel. And he was the first person ever to commit murder. And so therefore he deals with the passing of violent criminals or people who have died by violent means. And so, possibly, if you were going to pick from actual voodoo, that might be someone Chucky could maybe get something out of, because not only do they believe that these Iowa, they help people pass on, but you can also call upon them for different reasons, like offerings and sacrifices and stuff. And with Baron Criminel, it's usually, like I say, violent criminals. Like if a loved one was murdered, you would call upon this Iowa to enact some kind of retribution.
Interesting. And I think some religions do have an opposite to the good gods, the temptation, etc. Similar, like the devil. And I think it's okay to use those gods or Iowa as characters, but this is still a fictional version of voodoo. So, I don't know. I'd be fascinated to know what practitioners of voodoo or vodou actually think about this.
Yeah, it's definitely interesting because I guess it ties into something we're not intimately familiar with. Even though I wouldn't say I'm intimately familiar with Christianity. It's sort of a debate, I guess, with, why is Christianity okay to mess around with like this? Like, why is it okay for American TV shows and media to play around with the concept of Christianity?
You mean stuff like Lucifer, for example?
Yeah, stuff like that. And I guess that ties in more with historical standings. That Christianity, not just as a religion, but as a form of, like the Vatican and all that. The Vatican, on behalf of, God, has a real influence on the world.
I think what you're getting at is that it's along the lines of it's almost more acceptable to go for whoever has the greatest power. Like at the moment, Boris Johnson's getting a lot of stick because he is in the public eye more than the local politician from down the road. Similarly, Christianity is the dominant religion, and therefore that's the one that gets the most coverage, be it good or bad. That's probably true.
Yeah, I mean, if you make a bad portrayal of God in, a TV show, that's not going to change anything about the standing of Christianity in society. But something like this, if you reference, a more Eastern religion, then that that can more easily sway people's opinions of what they think they know about those religions.
I think for me, I'm glad I did this. I think it's nice to know a little bit more about what this fantasy world's lore is based on. And I would like to see some kind of acknowledgement and expansion and sensitively done elaboration on what voodoo is in this world, where it comes from, where the corruption is, and why there's evil and that kind of thing. And like I said before, I'd love to see a John Bishop flashback, but there's no reason why there can't be a Louisiana voodoo priestess as a character in the next series of Chucky, who comes as someone who wants to fight this bad element and could even reveal where the corruption comes from, that maybe it isn't Damballa, it's or whatever, and I think there's definitely scope for some positive voodoo or vodou characters in season 2 for sure.
Yeah, because we've discussed how no good person has ever messed around with magic in this story yet. And I think someone can come in and be like, well, yeah, like, we can use that to our benefit, and many people
Well, they have
do.
John Bishop, but no one in the teleseries, you're right, only John Bishop across the whole franchise has ever been a magic user other than Tiffany and Chucky.
Yeah, I definitely think that definitely deserves some more exploration, because we see Tiffany's use of magic was very much tied to like voodoo for dummies. She is very much if this is the right word, like gentrifying this kind of culture and magic.
I think Chucky's the same.
But that's the thing. Chucky, I would say definitely, yeah, Chucky is using it for his own gain. But with what we see in Child's Play 1, when Norris visits his apartment, like, he has floor-to-ceiling murals of, like, him praying to John Bishop and him worshipping Damballa. That's never been explored. Even now, it's only just been hinted at that he actually has some belief in this.
It's something I would like to see expanded in season 2, that's for sure.
Yeah, definitely.
And I think, we've had a little bit of a chat, but I am still very interested to see what David comes up with when he does his episode of Kid Stuff on Voodoo and Vodou, because I think he's going to do more research than we did.
I definitely want to hear a full episode of someone talk about this.
So, Dev, it's your turn to take over, because I've read no fucking articles over the last few weeks, and apparently you've got loads of news that I don't know about, so hit me.
Well, yes, since season 1 ended, Don Mancini has been making the rounds. He's been, doing all his interviews, doing his press coverage, and he's been not giving concrete answers, but he is being hinting heavily at where he wants to take all of these plot lines. So these quotes from him are kind of answering a lot of what we've been dancing around.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, so this big fandom article I'll go into. In this fandom piece, he basically talked about everything, so it's quite expansive. His thoughts on Nika. Okay, so we've left Nika in yet another precarious position in which the odds are stacked against her. But really, the motivation for this continuously is that I want to give Fiona more cool stuff to do. When I pitched this to her, she was like, oh my god, like what? It's obviously somewhat inspired by Boxing Helena, referring to a 1993 movie directed by Jennifer Lynch. And in that movie, a man amputates the limbs of a woman he's obsessed with. So that's a pretty clear reference there, an homage. And he talks about this as a logical progression. I didn't go into the season thinking one of the things I want to do is a nod to Boxing Helena. It was really part of the organic process when I was working on the Bible for the season and wanting to set up another cliffhanger. What would Tiffany do at that point? And it made total sense that she would do that. And I also knew that I was extending or offering Fiona another major acting challenge.
Yeah, and I think the most important point there is that is what Tiffany would do. She is a truly evil, mad woman. And I don't feel like it's out of character in any way, shape, or form for Tiffany, even if it's an unpleasant thing to watch.
She is in love, quote unquote, with Nika at this moment. And one of her major relationships over the last couple decades is someone that has been able to be torn apart and re-put back together and stuff. So, like, her last love has had all her limbs chopped off multiple times. So,
Yep.
in a really dark way, is it like this is just kind of how she sees everybody now.
Yeah, I think there's real truth in what you're saying. It's still grim, and I 100% acknowledge that it was unpleasant to watch, but it does make sense. This is what this franchise is about. It's about body horror. It's about whether or not you are still you if you are no longer in your original case, or whatever you know what I mean, your original husk. None of these words are nice. Your original body. Let's just go with that. And yeah, I think it's important to acknowledge that this franchise is grim.
Well, I mean, that's an interesting thing, and I only just thought of that now, is that, like, Tiffany has an obsession of Nika, but you would think it was one of physical attraction. Like, she enjoys being a lesbian. But if it's purely sexual, why would she disfigure the body she likes being with? So clearly there's something a little deeper there. I don't think respects Nika as a person, but, like, she wants Nika no matter what shape she's in.
Whilst true, you've got to remember that there's never been any consent in this relationship.
Oh yeah,
Tiffany
obviously,
is
yeah.
a rapist.
Yeah.
And yeah, is it really a stretch to think that someone who has been consistently, regularly raping someone for a fortnight would then disfigure them? Because I don't think it is.
Yeah, I think it goes a bit more deeper than that, because if she thinks that Nika just has, a nice pair of legs, then, why get rid of them?
Yeah, I know what you mean.
But, so he's said about that. He said what was really funny was someone from the studio called him and said, we have a question. Is Nika going to be a major character in season 2? Mancini recalled that he said yes. And they went, okay, great, because we're just thinking about the budgetary ramifications of what that entails.
Right. Huh.
So Mancini definitely has plans. I don't imagine Nika being like this for the entirety of season 2. I don't know. I can't imagine it being too long term.
I don't know. I would find it a little bit tasteless to find a solution to being paraplegic. I don't know. I think with the whole kind of concept of people's inverted commas soul being in different bodies in this franchise, there's definitely ways around it, but I don't know whether I want there to be. I would want to see this character face the reality of being paraplegic, and yeah, it's a tough one. I don't want an easy solution for someone being paraplegic. That would feel cheap.
Yeah, I will say, however it is, he wants to give his actors challenges. So I don't think it would be as easy as her going into someone else's body or going into a doll, because then that isn't Fiona acting then. It would be something else. So he definitely wants to do something with her as the person she is now, currently.
I'd argue that she's had enough challenges. Being a woman playing your dad, that's a pretty impressive challenge.
Yeah, it is. It's pretty impressive that he didn't think that was enough.
Playing your dad who looks like Tommy Wiseau. I mean, that's a big one. Hi, Fiona. I've got this idea. Do you want to dress like Tommy Wiseau and pretend to be your dad? Yeah, all right.
I didn't actually get those quotes. I should have. Those. I did, because that's the thing. I didn't see the quote what it was from. I just saw it on Twitter. But there was some interesting quotes from Fiona, apparently, where she said that she wasn't quite ready to just go back after playing her dad. So this, I think that's interesting. Like, she likes to, play around with gender and stuff. That's cool. Okay, quick one here. When the kids are at the cemetery at the end, you clock that glove hand right. That could be either Andy or Kyle, because we saw them both buying driving gloves, and because Andy got them both driving gloves, and he said, yeah, that was very deliberate.
Well, yeah, but it could be anyone who's bought a pair of gloves.
But I think from what he's saying, it's either going to be Andy or Kyle. So I think from what he's saying, it's unlikely it's going to be someone else.
Fair enough. I'm a little bit disappointed. Well, actually, if it's Kyle, that's better than fucking De Silva.
He also says here that, just in terms of the other characters, like Jake, Devon, and Lexi, he doesn't want to get into specifics about how these characters could continue, but he just says stay tuned. So, I mean, who knows? Maybe these characters won't be a big part in season 2, but maybe they will.
Oh, I'd be disappointed if they weren't a big part of it. I think that they've gone through enough that they should be still around. But you could argue that there are characters that aren't around that have also been through enough. We've talked about them before. Karen and Mike Norris, even Jesse and Jade, Glenda, Tyler. All these characters have been through about as much as the main protagonists of the Chucky series.
Yeah, I don't know about... I wouldn't say they would disappear. Maybe take a slight backseat to some new characters. Sort of how the Legacy ones took a backseat. Maybe.
Like I say, I want a Voodoo Voodoo kind of character.
God, I want that as well,
main character.
Yeah. He said here, about the Tiffany doll. He said, I knew I always wanted to bring the Tiffany doll back at some point from the ending of Cult, but it was Tony Gardner's idea to actually do that scene and, give credit where credit is due. And so that's interesting. That's Tiffany showing up where she does. That wasn't his idea.
Right.
And that, I guess gives you a slight idea to stuff like the inclusion of Glenda, that he doesn't know exactly where all these pieces are going to be placed.
I mean, that's the reality of modern television writing, isn't it? It isn't just Don Mancini writing this. It's a writing team like any other American telly show.
And that's interesting because that's something he's never really done, because with the movies, it is just him as the writer. And he said, he said that the contributions and the writing, the staff room and stuff, he said that's been really great and he's really enjoyed working with other people. So that's cool.
And he will have ultimate creative control as the showrunner. So, someone decides that they want Tiffany to come back and she'll have 4 heads. He might decide, no, I don't want that actually. Although now I've said it. The idea of like a doll with 2 or 3 heads that argue with each other, that would be fun. Some, like a kind of a sewn together type situation. That would be great fun.
Well, I remember there's a line in Bride, is there not, where Chucky mentions Tiffany's sister. And I want to...
Yeah.
We've had Chucky talking to Chucky, but I want Jennifer Tilly acting with Jennifer Tilly.
Oh, that would be wonderful.
But he's got some mentions about returning characters like that. He talked about the meta aspect of Tiffany possessing Jennifer Tilly. I think we'll probably delve even more into that in season 2 and see what that's like on a more practical level. So that's interesting.
We definitely mentioned this at the time, and I love how Jennifer Tilly is still a poker player in this world, and that it's Tiffany that's good at poker, and that's something I would like to see them, again, toy with.
Again, we have that major gap, don't we, of between Seed and Curse. We can see what Tiffany's been up to in between those big long gaps. Maybe she did get into poker.
Mad.
A similar character, he said he couldn't get specific about Glenn and Glenda. He said, this is probably one where I'm not allowed to say too much, but I love those characters. I think it's probably safe for me to say that you haven't seen the last of them.
Which is wonderful.
And again, he seems to be referring to them as 2 distinct personalities now.
Yeah.
Which seems like the way he's going to go.
Yeah, I think that's probably the best way to deal with it. You can't retcon the fact that they were split into 2 people.
Well, see, my understanding... Well, not my understanding. I guess my retconning of... If Chucky can split his soul, but essentially be the same person, is Glenn and Glenda not both the same person, but one person... Because they're in physical bodies, one is choosing to be male, and one is choosing to be female?
Yeah, that's the way to deal with it. You're absolutely right.
But they are still essentially the same person, but they're going down different paths now.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. And I think that will be fascinating to look at. That they're going to have their own... Each of the 2 are going to have their own perception of self created by the situation that they were put in. That's fascinating as far as I'm concerned.
And you know what? I don't know if they were identical twins, but it did seem like they were twins in Seed, so we could get some more fun double casting like Devon Sauer.
Brilliant.
What's the next one? He talks about the genre as a whole. He said one of the aspects of this show that we've really enjoyed doing is plugging Chucky into a kind of young adult teenage realm. And that's one of the big part. I think one of the big parts of a teenager's life is their relationship to their parents. If you're dealing with any kind of YA material, you're going to get that. This is a horror show, and even though there's a lot of humor in it, I wanted it to be horrific. And one of the ways we've accomplished that is by killing off the parents, some of whom deserve it, but some of whom do not.
No, and some of them definitely didn't. I mean, Bree was genuinely tragic, and so was Nathan. Nathan's death was so undignified as well.
It was, yeah. It was really kind of quietly sad, that one. But yeah, I mean, that's something we picked up on as the show went on. I think that a lot of those characters we assumed would be fodder, but then they evolved into actual characters, and that was really interesting and really engaging to follow.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Okay, we got some interesting technical stuff here. There is a bit of an overlap, because in episode 5, Nika says it's been 2 weeks since Cult of Chucky. When you do any kind of sequel, there's a little bit of retconning. Hopefully minor retconning is often necessary. Some fans have said, well, this doesn't make any sense because Cult of Chucky was in the winter. But you know what? That's Rhode Island, and they're having a really inclement, snowy October, apparently. And he says here then, we're just kind of vague about the specific year. You kind of have to be a bit vague about it, because it's like, do you take Cult of Chucky that occurred in 2017 and then move that forwards to 2021? That's an interesting way of putting it that a lot of people hadn't really considered. I think a lot of people were thinking, oh, if this is 2 weeks later, then this means the TV show is set in 2017. But
yeah,
there's no reason why you can't take a past film and then change where that is taking place.
Okay, yeah.
Because you do have in the TV show, Logan's grave does say 2021. So there is some signifiers of when that's taking place. But then at the same time, he points out that the TV show does not address the pandemic. And so could be considered to be a slightly alternate reality.
It's definitely an alternative reality. Yeah. There's no doubt that it's an alternative reality, because the powers that this version of voodoo have don't exist in our world. There aren't people who can transfer their soul into a fucking doll.
Let's see. He's talking about some more characters, more actors returning. He thinks Blaze Crocker, who was the actress that played young Tiffany, he thought she was really amazing and wants to see more of them. He said, this is just off the top of my head, but whereas this season we threaded it throughout the whole season, maybe in season 2 there will be specifically one episode that has a flashback focus. I really enjoy those characters now, and I think of them almost as different characters, young Charles and young Tiffany. Those actors are so great, and that's so much really in my motivation with all this stuff over the decades, is I love actors. I love working with actors, and I love writing stuff for actors that I know will give them more shit to do.
Fascinating. And that does suggest that if he does that, there is space for John Bishop. All of my things are coming into place, Dev.
Yeah, I think there's definitely more flashback stuff they can explore. But that's interesting to have a whole episode about flashbacks.
You say that, but we just complained about the bollocks that Walking Dead does.
We did,
so
yeah.
I'm not sure I want that, to be honest with you.
This would really have to, that episode would really have to tackle a lot of stuff. Really try and make it significant. Yeah, he said, there are just a couple of characters he mentions. He said, and the article says jokingly, of Eddie Caputo. But did he die? Do we know that he died?
Fuck off.
I mean, yeah, I don't know if him coming back would be interesting. But again, another character that we did see in flashbacks.
Oh yeah, I'd like to see him in flashbacks, but I don't want him to have survived.
I would like to see adult Eddie, the 80s. I'd like to see a bit more of that friendship with Chucky.
Me too.
And then, yeah, he talks about Perry Reeves, who plays De Silva. He said he hasn't talked to Perry Reeves in a long time, but he was really friendly with her. She just posted online asking, would you want me to be on the show? And all the fans said yes, so she is very much up to be...
Not all the fans.
She is very much up for being on the show, and she's made that vocal. So, yeah, that seems plausible that she'd want to, be in it.
Of course she is. She's got fuck all work.
I think she's still in stuff. She's still...
I would like to be on the show.
But I think she's still like a regular TV star.
Whatever.
And then
Meh. Meh. Meh.
And then really the most vaguest of responses was talking about Karen and Mike. He said, there is some possibility. Do you want to see them?
Yes.
So, I mean, that kind of implies that Mancini is not interested in those characters. But, I mean, if he thinks of an interesting way to bring them back, maybe, yeah.
Oh, so he's interested in De Silva, but he's not interested in Mike Norris and Karen. Get in the sea. Love you, Don, but my goodness, get your priorities right, fam.
And again, for the mystery, he does not mention Tyler at all, so...
Of course he doesn't.
So, yeah, that fandom article was a lot of, like, talking about characters and stuff. The other article... Oh, by the way, that was one thing. I mentioned the YouTube channel Dead Meat in the finale.
Yes, you did.
James and Chelsea, who run the Dead Meat channel, they occasionally interview people who are involved in horror stuff. And they did an interview with Don Mancini and the young cast, the main kids. I didn't get to watch all of it before doing this, but an interesting thing was the way Don sees his own franchise is he thinks of it like the Bond franchise. He thinks that it is perfectly natural for someone to be a fan of like the Roger Moore era, but also be a fan of the Daniel Craig era, when tonally they are very different.
Okay.
That's how he imagines Chucky. There are big tonal differences in the franchise, but they're all deliberate, and he enjoys going between them.
Huh. Cool. That makes a lot of sense to me.
Yeah, and that's interesting. And I think that's something people enjoy in a lot of slasher franchises, because, you know, as silly as it is that, you know, as silly as it is when Jason goes to New York or goes to space, people end up enjoying that because it's just something different.
I will go to my grave with Jason X as my favourite fucking Friday the 13th film. Fight me.
That is, it's a really fun film. I think, yeah, if you know what you're doing when making a silly film like that, then it can be really enjoyable. And that kind of leads into the last interview I read with him. And this was only a short quote, but from Bloody Disgusting, he talked about his influence from the Hannibal TV show, working on that, and how that really gave him the inspiration to do Chucky as a TV show. And he says, I found it particularly instructive on Hannibal because it was an established movie franchise and literary franchise that now has made its way to television, but with a very specific vision that Brian Fuller had. When I worked on that show, one of the things that was so exciting about it was it felt, in a way, like fan fiction done by experts. So he sees, you know, a proper show like Hannibal as fan fiction.
Well, isn't that kind of what writers of long-established stuff should be? I mean, I'm a huge fan of stuff like The Big Finish, Doctor Who, and I'd argue that's the best fan fiction of all time, better than some of the original fucking Doctor Who run on in the 60s, 70s and 80s. And, you know, Russell T Davies was an unashamed fan of Doctor Who when he brought it back with Christopher Eccleston. I just think that the term fan fiction has been almost bastardized to mean something bad, when that's just not actually the case when it's done well.
I mean, when you look at it like that, it's like Star Trek. It's like Star Trek was Gene Roddenberry's baby. It was his whole idea. But eventually he took a step back and other people took over Star Trek. Is Star Trek from there on fan fiction?
Exactly that.
You know, like Nightmare on Elm Street. Once Wes Craven took a step back, is that the sequel's fan fiction more than the actual creative original intention?
Nightmare on Elm Street 2 wasn't written by Wes Craven, and you can tell. But gayest film ever. If you've not seen Nightmare on Elm Street 2, it's basically just really fucking gay. Sorry, it's unintentionally gay. It's like homoerotic gay. Oh, it's just
there is a documentary on that. Have you seen the documentary on that?
No.
They made a documentary a couple of years ago about the making of it, and it's very interesting because the back and forth between like the writer and the director is so. It's like, I didn't mean for this to be gay. That wasn't my idea. And then like he wanted it to be gay, and then the other guy would be like, I didn't want it to be gay. He wanted it to be gay, and it's. Like, some people had no idea it was going to be like that, and then some people, like the actors, were like, yeah, when I read the script, it read very gay.
Yeah.
So
I want to watch this.
yeah, it's definitely interesting because none of them seemed to be on the same page for what the movie was going to be like.
Brilliant. We don't have to deal with that kind of shit now. We have Chucky, which is the gayest fucking slasher ever on the telly, and it was brilliant. But Nightmare on Elm Street 2 was fascinating for its time. But we're not a Nightmare on Elm Street podcast. We're the Chucky news. Chucky news. I'm an idiot.
That was pretty much it. But on that,
well, I sang.
But to round up what we were talking about with the fan fiction, I guess what we're going to eventually talk about with fan fiction.
Ugh.
It wasn't even in the article. It was someone commenting on the article, but they said all fiction should be fan fiction. If the writer isn't a fan, then what the hell are they?
Agree.
And
Very
that
much agree.
Makes sense. Yeah, that's what I mean. You know, when people took over from Gene Roddenberry on Star Trek, they were fans. And yes, like Star Trek has gone through loads of different iterations. Like different showrunners and different people have turned Star Trek into something else. But I find for the most part, as long you can tell when they're a fan.
Yeah, I agree.
And I think that's what Chucky works so well, because Don has done it. Yeah, he's changed the tone and he's changed the genre, and he could change it into something completely different if he wants. But he is such a fan of his own work, in a way, that he knows what everyone else is a fan of, and so he's always incorporating the best of everything.
I think you're right. So, Dev, we have talked for 2.5 hours on an episode that I thought wouldn't last very long at all. And is there anything you want to plug before we go?
God, just all the usual stuff. Twitter, you can find me on Twitter at Absolute Travesty. I'm not doing too much. I'm trying to work on a YouTube video. I'm very close to finishing the editing on a YouTube video. So, I know, check my Twitter for that. But on that note, I'm going to try and take some parts of early Chucky Vision episodes and just like 5-10 minute bits, and I'm going to try and put video to them.
What?
Just like a discussion point. You know, like we've talked about Nika, or like we've talked about Darbala. Taking a segment like that and then putting it on YouTube. So for the listeners, if there's anything in past episodes that you've really enjoyed us talking about, mention it, and then I'll highlight it.
Well, you know that we are actually on YouTube, right?
The full things?
Yeah, like the audio on the We Made This YouTube channel. We don't tend to promote it very much, but you can just stream us on YouTube if that's your thing. If people want that, I can stick that on the socials. It's just not something we've ever really promoted. We do it because it's easy and free to do when you upload to Spreaker. But none of the We Made This shows really promote it. Did you not even know?
I didn't know.
Ah, shit. Well, do it anyway, because I think that's a really cool idea.
Yeah, no, I follow other YouTube. It's like Mr. Sunday Movies. He does podcasts on TV and sort of like We Made This. He does weekly coverage of all the current stuff. He'll take like 10 minutes and he'll put video to that, and then you can watch that regardless of the podcast. Do you know what I mean? It sort of becomes its own thing. Because I don't know, because we've had some interesting talks about Don Bala and Nika and stuff, and I think if people wanna very specifically hear about that, then instead of going through a whole episode, they can just find that segment on a video.
Fair enough. Give it a whirl. If it don't work, don't do it again, innit? If you're looking for me, it's at MarkAdamsHC on both Twitter and Instagram. Much prefer Twitter. Instagram is hard. And I am currently working on 2 other podcast projects. the Red Dwarf podcast, Shipwrecks and Comatose, at Red Dwarf Pod on Twitter, and the Kids Telly, I suppose, would be the general way of describing it. Kids Telly podcast, Right in the Childhood, which is at RITC Pod on Twitter. And I am currently working on another project, which is in the early stages. It will be a monthly podcast that should be really, really interesting. So keep an eye on CHUCKYVISION because, I'll mention it on our Twitter feed and you might want to listen to it. And also, I am appearing quite regularly on Podcast 616 at the moment, which is the MCU podcast on the We Made This podcast network. All of these things we'll share on our Twitter feed because, if you like us chatting about this to great length and in painful detail, you might like to hear us do the same on other shit.
Cool.
So thank you very much for joining us for this super long episode of CHUCKYVISION. And we'll be back next month as we go monthly with various different interesting elements of the franchise. First up is the remake. We're going to take a look at that. So we will see you in about a month's time. And until then, wanna play?
CHUCKYVISION is a podcast brought to you by the We Made This network. Follow us on Twitter at CHUCKYVISION. Follow the network on Twitter at WMT_network. Our website is WeMadeThisNetwork.com. The logo was designed by Dev, and the theme tune composed by Dark Fantasy Studios. Wanna play?
Hello everyone, this is Tony, Network Chief of We Made This. As you know, our podcast network brings together a brilliant assortment of talent who talk about all kinds of pop culture content, such as the episode you just listened to. We're not going anywhere, but we'd love to keep the lights on for even longer if you're able to support our network on Patreon. For just £2 a month, you get your name in lights and the satisfaction of knowing you're helping us produce more great audio. And for £3 a month, you'll get your name in lights, but you'll also get access to an exclusive bi-monthly podcast from the We Made This talent pool on podcasting, pop culture, and, well, you tell us. We'll take your suggestions. For less than the price of a coffee per month, you can help keep We Made This going. Just head to patreon.com/We Made This. That's patreon.com/We Made This. And get the ball rolling. Elsewhere on We Made This. Podcast 616, a Marvel Universe podcast. And I think that's why she is immediately likeable. I liked her straight away. I find her engaging. I think she's well performed, well written. I think she's a strong new character that they're bringing in because she has a big legacy in the comics, and I think they've really done it well on the evidence of this and the second episode.
Yeah, I think you're right there to mention that she's definitely rebelling, isn't she, from her upbringing. Like you say, she lives in quite an impoverished kind of apartment, it looks like, nothing special, and she could definitely afford better, couldn't she? So, but for all I know, that's like $1 million apartment in New York. I don't know.
It probably is, yeah.
Prices are so crazy there, but...
We dig music.
I tell you what, for all the anger of the Riot Girl movement in the early 90s, we had nothing then compared to how f***ing angry we are all now. We're perimenopausal. And I want to start a new girl band called Waning Estrogen, and we're going to take on the fucking world.
Although based on last month's episode, unless you have to use a sat nav to get anywhere.
Yeah, the tours might be a little bit. Get someone else to drive you.
This is not where I'm meant to be going.
Shipwrecked and Comatose, a Red Dwarf podcast.
Should we talk about the set on Moneybags?
Let's.
I quite like it. As much as it's It seems a little bit shonky for a show that's giving away that much money. But I like the chute. I like the visual of pushing lots of money down the chute. I thought that was cool. The conveyor belt at least works and isn't as shonky as the Generation game. And it's fast as well.
Yeah, it doesn't feel like it's some poor bloke on a bike. It looks like an actual conveyor belt, so it's not some bloke on a bike, because it doesn't stutter.
Yeah, I watched it initially thinking, how smooth is this going to be? And it's very smooth, you know. It's got value.
Check out all of these shows and more on the We Made This podcast network.